Coming up in today's podcast.
On the topic of employment, that I recently spoke to somebody who's never been part of the Brethren but who works for them, and I said to him, I didn't say anything, I had just discovered that, and I said, oh, and what do you think of them? And he just looked at me and he said, well, money is their God. And I said, yes. And then he said, and their second God is alcohol, which
Wow.
I thought was very interesting. Somebody's worked for them for a long time, and it's a big company. He knows the Brethren well. And on that note, to anybody who's thinking of leaving and who's daunted by the loss of finances, I want to encourage you to not make money your God either, because it's very easy, without realizing it, to have subconsciously taken on that God and that kind of goal, financial success and material prosperity as being your God. And it's just, life is so much better when money is not your God, when your career choices and your lifestyle and your relationships, your values are not defined by material prosperity. There's so much more wonderful things to live for. And yes, we all need money, and being poor is awful, and I don't want to minimize the struggle of financial stress and strain. And yet, I can say, as personally, as somebody who struggled with my roles in the Brethren because they were a poor fit for who I am and my interests and my strengths and my talents, it's been incredible to be out of the Brethren and to be free. I've had multiple different jobs by choice, trying out different things of what I'm good at, learning what I'm bad at, and all the way through, it has been such a delight to be able to choose jobs that it's not to do with their, the bottom line of the pay packet I receive, but aligning them with my particular strengths and interests. And that there's just such a profound joy in being able to find meaningful work. It's a deep human need, and it's so wonderful to be free to choose your own employment and to get guidance around that instead of having it dictated to you.
Welcome to the Get a Life podcast. Explore survivor stories. Uncover the hidden truths. Join our X-Called conversations. You matter, and so does your story.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Get a Life podcast. We're back with the UK team. I'm Jackie Hart, and as most of you know, I'm an ex-member of the exclusive Brethren who now call themselves the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, having left a good few years ago now. I'm here with my friends. Do you want to say who you are, Andrea?
Hi, I'm Andrea Becker, and I left the PBCC a couple of years ago, and I live in Germany.
Fantastic.
Yeah, hi, I'm Ross Turner. I was kicked out of the Brethren in 2014.
Yeah, hi, I'm Gilli. I left the Pebs of the Brethren back in 2012.
Yeah, hi, kia ora everybody. I'm Lindy, and I'm dialing in from New Zealand here today. And I left the Brethren, you know what, I've actually lost count now, but 15 or 16 years ago. And I'm also key part of the Olive Leaf Network. So really glad to be joining you all today.
Thank you, Lindy. So one of the reasons for this podcast, we were going to call it the Thinking of Leaving podcast, and we felt it was a very valuable topic to discuss because at Get a Life, we often get contacted by people who are unhappy, who are thinking of leaving but aren't sure. They don't know whether it's going to be right for them to leave. Maybe it wouldn't be right for them to leave. And I think it was, however, how many years ago was it, Lindy? 2 or 3 years ago, you and some colleagues put together a leaflet that covers some things to consider if you are thinking of leaving. And we thought it would be really helpful to talk about this leaflet, go through it, and perhaps share some of our own experiences, helpful to those never been in the Brethren to understand the process you have to go through when leaving, but also helpful to anyone inside the Brethren who listens to this and they are having doubts or thoughts and they just don't know what to do. So what I'll start by doing is sharing my screen to show the leaflet. So this is the leaflet, which we'll obviously put as an attachment at the end of this podcast. And it's called Thinking of Leaving. And what it does is it goes through various different aspects of what you had to do. And I thought it'd be helpful if we perhaps talked about those.
Yeah, Jackie, I think that the key thing that stands out to me, like even re-looking at this, you're right, we did it a few years ago,
Mm,
but just even re-looking at it today is just how comprehensive it is. And I think
absolutely.
that's both overwhelming and also really useful
Yeah.
because it is overwhelming to think of leaving the Brethren because it is a group that's so totalitarian, like it affects so many areas of your life. And so, yeah, when you're thinking of leaving, you at some point have to address, not everybody does straight away, but at some point, if you leave, you have to address literally every single one of these areas. And so, the better you can be prepared by having started to think about them all or addressing as many of them as possible, then the better. And yeah, hopefully it isn't overwhelming. Hopefully, sorry, I mean the document itself, hopefully, we made every effort to make it as simple as possible and just kind of trying to stick to key information on one page for each of those areas. Each of them you could like go into for hours, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully it is a helpful, like a tiny beginning of a roadmap for such a big journey.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's 10 different topics here that the leaflet covers, isn't there? Covering motives, family, communication ability, safety, finances, and so on. And I'd like to touch on each one, but each one could be talked about in a lot of depth. And I think everybody's journey is different,
Yeah.
and everybody's reasons and motives are different, and circumstances are different. But it is a good way perhaps of focusing that sort of mental gymnastics that goes on in your head when you don't know whether to leave, what to leave, something's not quite right. One of the
Mm.
first things is motives, and I think that's probably a really good place to start because the questions asked here are ones that I think all of us may have been through. It's why do you want to leave? What are your reasons, motivation? What are your reasons or motivation? What are you excited about and what you're fearful about?
Mm.
The one difference I would make, but maybe we can draw on all our own experiences here, is this is somebody that's thinking about making a choice to leave. And of course,
Yeah.
not everybody has that. And Ross, I don't think you had a choice, did you? You were kicked out, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I'd been thinking about leaving for quite a while. It happened sooner than I had planned.
Yeah, and that often
Yeah.
happens. A crisis happens, and suddenly you find you've got to get out that house. Yeah, yeah. So when you were thinking about leaving, Ross, what were your motives?
So obviously my main motive was because I'm gay. I was trying to live a double life in the Brethren, and it ended up causing me to have several nervous breakdowns and also caused addiction problems as well. I thought I would be able to stay in there as a gay celibate man, but my therapist at the Priory made me realise that if I didn't leave, I would actually die of my addiction. So it was a choice that I had to think long and hard about. Did I want to, basically die, or did I want to live?
Yeah,
Putting it quite starkly.
yeah,
So obviously I chose life, and it that sort of like exacerbated my motivation to leave, really.
yeah. Yeah. And Andrew, you obviously are the most recent leaver out of all of us, and you were very fortunate well, I say fortunate, if you can put it that way, in that you left with your husband and family, didn't you? But what was the motivation for you? What was I mean, there's some quotes here on the actual leaflet, but what was your motivation?
Well, I mean, as somebody who literally read this leaflet before we left the Brethren, I found it very helpful, and it was really laid out really clearly, and questions that I thought, in the Brethren, you just kind of take everything for granted, right? Everything is taken care of for you, and it's really helpful to have it laid out like this so that you can go step by step and start thinking for yourself, which is not something we're trained to do very much in there. But
Yeah.
my motivation for leaving was really like I was deeply, deeply unhappy and didn't know why because I wasn't unhappy with my husband. And it clicked for me like it's the lifestyle that's making me unhappy. And then I was like, I don't want to raise my daughters in here. They're just going to end up like me, unhappy, stuck in some, country with some little kids and like serving a man and a system.
Mm.
So that was my motivation. And yeah, like Ross said, like same for us. We planned, oh, we'll maybe leave in 2 years. We left within 6 months.
It came about a bit sooner than you actually thought.
Run!
Yeah. Almost like once you'd made that decision that leaving is that option for you, is the only option for you, you want to. It got executed sooner than you anticipated. And then Gilli, I think we can remember from your podcast what was your motivation for leaving. It wasn't exactly you wanted to leave. It was at the time you'd met somebody else. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I'll quite happily hold my hands up and admit, the time of leaving, I didn't necessarily see the Peebs as being completely wrong. Don't get me wrong, I had my issues. I had my issues with personal, with people. I had my issues with the way things have been handled with our family and things like that. But yeah, I met someone who worked at the same place as I did, who wasn't in the Peebs, and started a relationship with her, and that ultimately made me, well, it forced me to make a choice as to whether I was going to choose the person that I'd fallen in love with, or whether I was going to choose a system that didn't allow me to choose who I loved. So that's, it's probably different from most people, but it's obviously, as time's gone on, you see a completely different picture. But at the time, from a motive point of view, it just goes to show there's a whole host of reasons as to why you might be facing the decision to leave.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Carry on, Lindy. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say that's so true, and I love the diversity of things here. Because Jackie, you came out as a young person.
I was quite young, so I was 18, and I can honestly say I was not motivated to leave at all. I thought the Brethren was fine. But like a lot of people, there were things that didn't add up. But I would say that I very much, 16, 17, 18, I had that Brethren hat on. So yeah, there's things here that don't add up. There's things here that I don't understand. But that's me. That's because I'm not right. And I very much, and I think that's the message you get given in the Brethren. I thought it's because something's wrong with me that I'm not happy, that I'm feeling the tension and I can't sleep at night and everything.
I think a lot of people will be able to relate to that, Jackie, is this funny feeling of being unsettled. And I related to that in a lot of the earlier podcasts. This, you can't describe what it is. You don't know what it is because you're not trained to look within and question yourself, right?
Yes.
Unless it's to do with the ministry or the testimony.
I agree. And I think you're also not taught how to evaluate things more objectively. So as I say, when you're in the Brethren, if you're unhappy or depressed or upset, the subliminal message given to you is that it's because you're not right. And there's never actually the circumstances you're in might not be right for you, which is a very different way
man that I am. Yeah,
a wretched man that I am. It's me. Yeah. So I wasn't really motivated to leave. I was literally put in a position where my parents and one of my brothers were shut up. As people know, that means you can't go to meetings. You're in a restricted, confined environment. And I was expected to leave home immediately and live with another Brethren family. And it was that I didn't want to do. So I asked for some time to think about it. And it kind of evolved from that, really. But at the time, I didn't see enough wrong with where I was in to think this isn't right for me. I hadn't got there until quite a way after. What about you, Lindy? Because you had a lot of questions when you were in, didn't you? And and your motivations for eventually getting out of it.
Yeah, I think, I mean, for me, I think, in reflection, I was obviously a bit of a nerd, and I had some reasons for that, some things that triggered asking some deep questions about, what is this life, and is there a God or not, and started reading the Bible, and unexpectedly that reading the Bible actually made me go, hang on, what I'm seeing around me with the lifestyle and the teaching and stuff is not actually very similar to what I'm reading here. And so for me, it was kind of almost that religious and spiritual angle of going, hang on, there's something not right here. That doesn't stack up. And so I'm actually really loving the diversity of experiences right here in this room with us. Like, each one of you I've encountered probably at least a dozen of others with similar reasons, Gilli, others have, found someone they loved on the other side. Ross, people who have felt that, their sexuality was incompatible with it. And Jackie, people, or Andrea, like your children, people who, their family in a way took them out. But yeah, so I love the diversity of that there. But I think, the booklet says having a clear understanding of your particular reasons for wanting to leave will help you feel more confident. And I think why it is such an important thing and why it is actually so hard is because, as Andrea said before, we in the Brethren, you're actively trained to not have your own kind of opinion and to know your own voice and that kind of thing. And we're actively taught to let someone in position someone in a position of authority make decisions for you and submit to your elders and all that kind of thing. And so even the concept of getting in touch with what do you want is such a foreign concept and something that you kind of almost have to really give yourself permission to do. And it's like a muscle you haven't even stretched. And so, really encourage the listeners, anybody who's thinking of leaving, to try and stretch that muscle and think about that, really sit with these questions, because often it's not a mental muscle that we've stretched, of identifying things like reasons, motivations, your feelings, your bigger purposes or whatever that you're after. And I met one guy who he was very clear his purpose in leaving was to have more fun. And I found it really actually very really joyful to kind of hear him say that, because I think I can probably get a bit too much of a overthinker or a deep thinker at times. And I loved it. He was just like, no, I just want to have more fun. And he was like, my biggest life goal is to have more fun, and I can't do it in the Brethren, so I need to leave. And I was like, wow, your clarity of thinking is incredible. But so I don't know if the others of you, I'd love to hear your reflections on the another thing that I personally had was huge pressure to stay and immense pressure through conversations with family, with priests, with friends, trying to persuade me that my reasons were not valid. When I did come through this place of going, actually, I think I need to leave, and I could name those things, then there was this immense pressure. And so that's why as well I think it's really important to know what you're doing and why, because of the pressure that can come. But did any of the others of you have this immense pressure hit you in the journey at some point of challenging why you were going?
I think you did, didn't you, Gilli? You had
massively. I left from my brother's house, and my partner that was then at the time collected me from my brother's house. And that very same night, I was called back to an elder's house who so happened to be also both of our bosses. And we were put under massive pressure in terms of they wanted me to stay there. They didn't want me to go with her. Wouldn't even entertain a conversation about trying to make anything, any feasible outcome. The only feasible outcome for them was to have me stay there and for her to go. And when they discovered that I wasn't for changing my mind on it, the last thing the elder said to me, just know that you're putting everything at risk. And I knew well he was referring to my job, because he was my boss, but he was also acting as the elder.
He wasn't referring to your soul then, Gilli.
Well, I think he was trying to infer that, but I knew what
but we knew what it meant in reality. Yes.
And even that, even that night, I obviously discovered this later down the line, but he then got in contact with probably 10 people from around the UK that he thought I was close to, and got them to all phone me, email me. And I literally, that night I ended up having to turn my phone off, because I had one guy on the phone who just would not hang up. He just would not go until I physically cut the call off and turn my phone off. And it was probably for that first week, at least that first weekend, it was just incessant people trying to contact me. But I then discovered a couple of years down the line that it was actually because the elder had basically got in touch with them, because he'd obviously thought, well, I can't convince him, so I'll try and manipulate people that he's supposedly friends with to come back. And obviously I left at sort of Christmas time, so I wasn't in work. But when I went back to work, I had meetings with the two of the directors for 2 days running, putting me under pressure, offering me to go to Australia.
All the little love bombing things.
All the things that, despite the fact that I've been wanting to go to Australia for a few years myself, and all of a sudden they were offering it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
that kind of pressure is just like wildly unfair, isn't it? And they know that we're like, young people are not cut out for it. They're also scared of it, right?
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important that people thinking of leaving listen to that podcast 110 of the Pre-C Visit, because that young person handled themselves so well, but it's also, I think I couldn't have handled myself as well as he did, right?
I think absolutely he did superbly. And I think there's quite an important point to get across, because this is not something I realise in the Brethren. As a human being, we have a right, and this is laid down, it's not just in our emotions, it's in law. We have a right under the Human Rights Act to choose what religion we like or to be of no religion. And we also have a right, if somebody is pressuring us, to refuse to speak to them. And that can be backed up by the law. So I think you're right. That young person in that podcast handled that visit superbly. But there are some characters who may not be able to do that. And I think
I'm sorry, Gilli. Like, I'm not saying you didn't handle it
no.
correctly, Gilli, at all. But like, I just so relate to that terrible pressure. Like when I left,
I can remember in the first months that even though we were, I was in my own, it was rented, but our own property, they were still trying to dictate who could and couldn't be in the room while they were talking to me. They were saying my partner couldn't be in the room, even though they were in our house.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, that kind of thing. And so and many times people don't know, because again we're so conditioned to obeying them, so we don't even know to exercise that muscle of actually, no, I have choice here, I have rights, I have a voice, and I have needs, and I have boundaries that I can dictate. We're not even used to stretching that muscle. So yeah.
You have the right to not talk to them either.
Yes.
Like that's what we've done since we've left. And it's been sometimes not easy and you feel a bit mean, but it's much easier. And I'm hearing of more and more people that are leaving that are just refusing contact, and they're getting shut up via email.
Yeah.
We got shut up via email. We had someone message us last week, another priest, after 2 years, please, will you talk to us again?
Just think, when I left, it was a long time ago, before emails. I remember a phone call in which the elder at the time asked to speak to me, and I can remember my dad calling up the stairs and saying, Jackie, will you speak to whoever? And I said no, and he went back on the phone and said, she refuses to speak to you. And that was it.
Go you, Jackie.
But the whole reason was this particular elder had given my dad so much mental angst that my dad had nearly had a nervous breakdown over it, and I'd witnessed that. And I was not going to let him do that to me. So the point there is to say, you have a right to say no. If you can't cope with that mental pressure and you don't feel you can counter it, just refuse to speak to them. And if they continue to hound you can turn up on your doorstep. In the UK, certainly you can call the law enforcement, but it's your choice, isn't it? It's your choice whether you want to speak or not.
Yeah, and I think going back to the motivations thing,
yes,
it's around also understanding in advance that nobody in there will accept your motivations as being valid. And so you're not, the whole purpose of finding your motivations and being able to name them is not for them. It's for you.
That's such an important point, Lindy. Yeah,
no matter what your motivation is, it's not going to satisfy them, and they're not going to think it's got any validity, and they'll try and talk you out of it. So it's more about just having that inner compass for yourself. And you could refuse to tell them your motives if you don't want to tell them. It is also none of their business in a way. It's more whether you want to be able to give people you love a reason for your choices and try to help them understand. But if you don't want to as well, you can keep that to yourself.
Absolutely.
Ross, go on. Sorry, I was just going to say, I'd like to pick up on what Gilli said about the priest got his friends Gilli's friends to call him. I can remember probably about a month or 6 weeks before I was withdrawn from. I speak about it in my podcast anyway, but I went through a stage where I had a crush on a young brother in the same locality. And about a month to 6 weeks before I was withdrawn from, they sent him round to speak to me, and he was there for nearly an hour trying to pressurize me to, think again and all the rest of it, because by that time they knew that I wasn't really interested in carrying on in the Brethren. I mean, to be honest, it didn't work because, as I say, by that time I was like, I don't want to, I don't want to know, and I basically told him that. But it is a tactic they use, is to get your nearest and your best friends to try and pressurize you. And I think people who are thinking of leaving need to know that that is one tactic they'll use, and don't fall for it, because they're not doing it because they're not doing it because they like you or love you or anything like that. They're doing it because they've been told to do it.
Yeah,
I think that's the important point to make, isn't it? Is that it may seem genuine, but a lot of the time, it's pure manipulation that they've been put up to it. Because, if I'd listened to a lot of the calls, well, obviously I had conversations with those people who were in touch with me, and it wasn't until someone actually told me 2 years down the line what had happened that night, and I personally would never have picked up that they'd actually been put up to contacting me.
It's coercive control, isn't it?
Yeah.
Totally, Andrea. Yeah. And on that point with motivations, which I think you're absolutely right, Lindy, that question there, have a clear understanding of your particular reasons for wanting to leave. There's another aspect that I would want to discuss here. The Brethren will often say, well, you're following your own will and not God's will, because these are your motivations for leaving. So perhaps we could just dissect that a little bit, because I personally don't believe that it's wrong to have your own self-desires and wills. So maybe, because that is something they'll, well, it's not God's will, you're following your will, you're following man's will, or whatever they'll say. Did anybody get told that at all?
100%. Yeah, I mean, obviously with me, it was very much about, oh, you're just following lust, it's not love, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you're right. And I think it's important that it's very difficult when you're in that situation, but it's important to realize that it totally is okay to follow your own will. It doesn't affect you, it doesn't have to affect your faith, your beliefs, whatever it is.
No. Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with giving yourself, apart from anything else, it's self-care.
Yeah. And
giving yourself some time.
It's giving yourself some time. And it's also, to be told that is completely invalidating your feelings, which is not a way to behave to a fellow human being, is it? Because it's saying, well, your desires are totally invalidated because they don't match the Brethren's ethos. And I think that's quite an important point to get across, because it's very easy when you're sitting there with elders saying you're following your own will, and the devil, or you'll let the devil in, which is what I was told. Well, I was told not to let the devil in over this, actually, but whether I did or not is another matter for debate. But yeah, it's understanding the pressures, and as we said, some people, if they voice their motives, will have the character to be able to counter it, and other people won't. And if you recognize within yourself you're the type of person that you cannot counter that strength of coercion, you don't have to. Simple as that. You don't have to, do you? Just say no.
Yeah.
Like we've been taught in the Brethren, you need to have your will smashed. I've been told that many times. Like,
broken.
Smash your will. And really, it's actually healthy to have your own will and your own, like, how would the world have got to where it is today if everybody was just the same, Yeah. And I was, as recently as a couple of weeks ago, had a text message conversation with my mom that I should have had 2 years ago, and she called me selfish. And I thought, it just reminded me again how much that she's old and she's lived her whole life in there. She's never exercised that muscle, as Lindy said, of that, accepting that you want something that's different from her, and it's okay. And it's all we can be different and still all survive on the same planet, you know? And I didn't want to raise my kids to have that. I'm losing my word here, but like that where they just follow along and say, yes, dear, yes, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. You know, you have to have that curiosity, and that's something that in the Brethren, you don't have individuality and uniqueness. You're all the same.
Yeah. Totally agree. And actually, a point you picked up on there, being told you're selfish, and that brings us quite nicely onto the second point, which are the thoughts about family, which is often the hardest hurdle, isn't it? And I'll pick it up where you said about selfish, Andrea, because I've heard of a few people who leave whose family have told them they're selfish. And I don't know, I didn't experience that, but I don't know if any of the rest of you did. I have a personal theory that families say that because they're the ones that know they've got to cut you out of their life if you leave, and they actually don't want to do that. So their way of turning that back is making you the bad person because you're selfish because you want to leave. And they're almost putting their own sorrow, if you like, onto you. I don't know if that's what you felt when your mother said that, or whether others have experienced a similar thing if they've been told they've been selfish in leaving by people they love.
Yeah, I did feel like that. And the strange thing is, you know, we started talking about leaving, me and my husband, and I said to my husband, I can't leave my mom. I don't know how I can walk away from my mom. And that was like a hurdle I had to get through to say to myself, you know what? I also have to accept that I have more of my life to live than her still. You know, she's 75, I'm 30, whatever I was. And I deserve to live my life for me. If she thinks that's selfish, I have to let her go. So I had to let her go. And that's something that, you know, in the Brethren, your whole world revolves around your family. It's all you have, right?
Yeah.
It's your first circle. And so for a Brethren person to think of leaving, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
But they will cut you off. They will treat you like garbage.
Yeah.
But you have to look at the big picture. And that's what I took from everybody else, all of you on this podcast today, is your stories and the strength that you've all had in building your new lives in spite of having to say goodbye to family.
And it doesn't mean it shouldn't hurt at times. And Lindy, we've got the questions on the screen here that you and others had kind of put together of the sort of things. I wonder if you could just talk us through your thought processes behind what you'd written. For example, you might want to discuss your thoughts and plans first. What were your thought process in trying to give some prompters about how to cope with this real loss of your family if you leave?
Yeah, so you're talking specifically about the family one there, are you?
I would say the immediate family. So, you know, like Andrea and her mother, Ross and his mother, Gilli and his family. Yeah, and people that have to leave children. Can you see it on the screen there? It sort of says.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
And I've got it in front of me. I mean, this, you know, in some ways it's just bonkers to even try to reduce something like family down to one single
one little
A5 like we have
paragraph.
here.
Yeah.
Because it's massive, eh? And as you said earlier, people have got such very different circumstances, like how it's poles apart to be a man in his mid-50s leaving, potentially leaving wife, children, grandchildren, elderly parents who rely on him, as opposed to, say, being, you know, a single female 18-year-old who doesn't have any dependents, but may also have no finances and no business experience. So yeah, there's such different things there. But yeah, so again, I think the key thing is just, you know, as the questions say, just thinking it all so carefully through, because some people do have family members they talk about it with first, who they can confide in a safe and a healthy manner. And others, you know, we know there's so many stories of people who've had to kind of plan an escape in the middle of the night because they can't bear, or they know it will be too difficult to face the pressure from family, or to try and think it through. I think there are some people who are more vulnerable than others when it comes to family, and that's anybody who's financially dependent on family. So often in the Brethren setup, that's more women than men. Women who have been stay-at-home mums, for example, and who haven't worked for a while, or who might have the husband controlling the purse strings, or if you're a younger person again, there's a lot of power, I guess, with your parents. So I think, yeah, just thinking through, I guess, your vulnerabilities with regard to your family situation, or there are others who have got care for a dependent kind of sibling, or high needs parent. So for them, it's going to be harder as well. But yeah, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. It's just such a massive.
It's a huge tangle of emotions, isn't it? And
and practical considerations, like it's terrible, the emotive impact, but also the practical considerations, like finances, like your will. What does this mean for your will if you have a will? Super challenging.
Well, I remember what Gilli said in his podcast, actually, like in the Brethren, you're used to such a high standard of living, and that's not normal. So in the real world, also it's good for people to be prepared to, maybe all the finances are tied up with family, or there's, your money is in a trust or in a property or whatever. But even if you have to leave and you work a minimum wage job and you live in a shared apartment, at least you're free. But you need to decide whether you can handle that and whether you're ready for it, because that's what you have to decide, what is important to you when it comes to the finances. Because now, especially now, I mean, when we were about to leave, like it was becoming popular for, say, business owners to get young brothers who have money and don't have a house yet to invest their money in properties. And that's just tying them in and tying them into the system more and more. And they're tied into this 15, 20-year loan.
Yeah. And the other thing was, I was going to ask, and actually probably a bit more directed at you, Andrea, this, because you left obviously with your husband and your children. And I often think, what happens in the Brethren if one partner is obviously experiencing unhappiness? How do you set about voicing that to your husband or your wife? Or do you realize it's a no-go area? I don't know how you overcome that one. I mean, yeah, you did it, Andrea, and you're shrugging your shoulders.
Well, I mean, that's that. Lyle wanted to leave for many years before I started to realize it, right? And he just said, I can't tell her because I don't want to lose her and the kids. And I said, but I pressed him. I was like, yeah, but what if I'd never left? And he said, well, I probably would have just been so unhappy. I would have just had to leave by myself without telling you.
Yeah.
So, thank the powers that be that I got my eyes opened by the podcast, because I don't know how.
But he could talk to you, that at least he could tell you how he felt. Because I've heard of tales where, one spouse can't tell their spouse because they're so fearful of the reaction. And that's tragic.
He didn't tell me, though, before I started talking about leaving. I didn't know.
Oh, so it was when you started to express some reservations that he said. Yeah, Lindy.
Oh, I was just going to say, there are horrific stories of a spouse dobbing in another spouse, right? When they, before they were necessarily ready for saying something that showed they were questioning the great man or whatever. So it is something that needs to be so carefully done. But I do think that from, and I don't have personal experience there, it is just hearing other stories, but that kind of thing of dropping like little hints or tips, or you can pick things up, does your spouse ardently read every single white book and leave them lying around, or have they not touched one for years? Have they possibly, have you possibly seen them talk or heard them talk about listening to a Get a Life podcast? Are they, how committed do they seem to Bruce Hales is really the key question. And then try so then that can potentially show you that you might be able to sound them out if it does look like there are questions there. But it is inherently risky, and I think for me personally, I reached a point where I was didn't feel comfortable talking to anybody or letting anybody know I had questions, because I knew the bomb blast that it would bring about. But basically for me, I kind of said to God, so to speak, I was like, this is kind of out of my hands. I don't know what to do here, so I'm just gonna keep going along, keep trying to sort my head out, keep trying to sort my plans out. And if at some point somebody challenges me directly and says to me, are you thinking of leaving, or do you believe in Bruce Hales as it was? Then I was like, for me, that's when, yeah, I'm not going to keep lying or hiding at that point. Not that I was necessarily lying, but you just can't. You have to live this double life because you can't let people know about your doubts. But yeah, for me, I was like, if somebody directly asks me, I'm going to take it that like fate, the universe, God has
Has
decided
decided.
now the lid is off,
Yeah.
and so that's how it happened for me. So I guess in some ways it's doing everything you can to prepare for it, but knowing that at some point there's going to be this kind of the cover's off, and in some ways
Watershed.
you'll never be able to be fully ready for that moment because it just you don't know what way it's going to go at the time. You don't know who's going to stand with you and who's going to turn on you.
Yeah. And I think with immediate family, if you think about, you can sometimes also, you talk about whether your spouse appears to be very committed. There can sometimes be little throwaway comments that and I will use an example of this. My mother was never that committed. And I can remember her coming out of a meeting once and saying in a very cross manner, at least as the Bible says, everyone did what was right in their own eyes. They weren't doing what
Yeah.
was wrong in their own eyes. And I can remember that comment was said with such animosity that stuck with me. Yeah, that she'd obviously seen a lot of things so there could be little throwaway comments. But I think one of the main things with family that we could perhaps touch on to try and help anybody that's agonizing over this is the immense hurt it causes when those loved ones do reject you. They may not do so immediately, but when the shutters come down. And Ross, I don't know if you want to talk about it, but I know you've experienced that with your mum, and it kind of came home a bit recently, didn't it? The hurt it caused and how you deal with that.
Yeah. You mean as regards her will, or
No, well, just as regards to the fact you've recently lost your mother, haven't you? But
yeah,
obviously, you and your mother were very close, and you've always said that. And she was perhaps the hardest person for you to not have contact with. Would that be a
yeah, definitely. And I remember soon after I was withdrawn from, I was going down to London to AA meetings, and my mum and dad took me to the local station to catch the train because they were still living at home at that point. And I asked my mum if I could have a kiss, and she said, "No, I can't do that because it's a breach of the testimony."
oh
And that really hurt
yeah,
because I was so close to her.
yeah,
And I think, you know, I think everybody deals with it differently. For me, I couldn't let go of her.
mm,
For the last 10 years, I wasn't able to let go of her. In fact, it got harder with every year that went past, really. Not being able to have any contact with her. I mean, I can't have contact with her now, full stop. But the hurt, it's still there.
yeah.
Yeah,
And I think that's really an important thing. You kind of have, it's useless to say you'll get used to it. It's useless to say you'll move on because I don't think you will, but you will learn to live with it in your own way. And
yeah,
then the other thing I think perhaps maybe we could share, people have lost family, but people have all found alternatives to family. And I'm thinking perhaps of people that have lost their own children to the Brethren or something like that. And there's alternatives. So I think there is focus beyond that enormous hurt of losing your spouse, your parents, your siblings, your cousins, your children necessarily. And you don't move on. I won't use that expression because that's a very sort of a flippant expression, I think. And I don't think the hurt ever goes away, particularly if your children reject you. But you do learn to find love and comfort in other people and other families, don't you? Or you build a family of your own, which I did. Yeah, you're able to for whatever reason.
yeah. I mean, obviously, as a gay man, I won't ever have children, but I've made my own family with my close friends,
Yeah. And the network, the
and the
people that
network that
care.
I've got. Yeah,
Yeah. And the people that really care.
And do you find comfort, Ross, in knowing that your close friends love you for exactly who you are? Like that's something I find a great
Mm,
comfort in, although that hurt of losing, your family, like you say, your mom, it never goes away. It's like a heavy blanket you kind of wear through your life. But it's so nice, like the small friend circle you have now, they really love you for you.
Yeah, and yeah, definitely. And I think also because we're used to people turning and running when anything goes wrong in the Brethren. You know, they don't want to know you when things start to go wrong. They don't really want to know you. But you find out here that your true friends will stick with you even when the going gets tough, basically.
And don't judge you.
No,
You're
don't judge
You're
you.
you.
Yeah,
We're all ourselves.
yeah. As you say, Andrew. Yeah, it's, you know, they just accept you for who you are, and it's lovely because you just don't get that in the Brethren.
Yeah.
Which kind of, although painful, it makes up a little bit for the ones that we know we can't have.
Yeah,
definitely.
It can help fill that human need to be loved and accepted, can't it?
Yeah.
Which we all have. We all have that human need, and it can help fulfill that, even if it's not coming for your immediate family. And the last point that I wanted to touch on with family, and this is probably more for people that are inside. One of the biggest issues that the Charity Commission had with Brethren was the way they divided families and the harm that caused. And the Brethren now claim, and indeed, if any Brethren member wants to go on the website, they actually claim that they don't divide families and that people in the Brethren can have as much contact as they like, and the church don't dictate that. Now, yeah, we know the reality. We know the reality is that because of the coercion, every Brethren member chooses to have no contact with a member that's left. But the message I would like to get across to anybody who's got that dilemma, you can use that information and what they agreed with the Charity Commission with your family to say to them, just because I'm leaving doesn't mean you have to cut me off. You do have a choice. Now, the family may be so, like you say about your poor mother, Andrea, her mindset is so brethrenized, they might not see it. But you can try and just say, you do actually have a choice. Just because I choose to go to a different church or choose not to go to your church, you don't have to cut me off. And that is backed by the fact that they have charitable status and actually by what they claim on their own website, that it's up to each member. And I sometimes feel, even if in this podcast, if this can empower one person inside to use that information to make that process less painful, it doesn't mean the family have to leave the church, but just that they can go around there. They can even respect that you can't eat and drink with me, but for goodness sake, give me a hug, give me a, do the family things.
Yeah, I hope my mom hears this, because 2 weeks ago I was in Montreal and I asked her if I could come and see her, and she said no, it would be too painful.
Yeah.
But she wanted to see my children.
Yeah, exactly. And what you want to say to her, it's okay. It's okay to have the, but you don't have to cut me off. And the claim is the church do not stop that. Each individual member chooses. The problem is each individual member, in my opinion, has been so indoctrinated that if you leave, that's what they're going to do. They don't realize they have a choice. So, it's just to try and get that across. You do have a choice. You do.
But also from a psychological point of view, I think it's important to point out that actually, because anyone who leaves will be the one that's done wrong.
Yeah.
Actually, you're not the one putting barriers up.
Totally.
You're not the one putting things in place to stop that communication.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to. Don't get me wrong, it's very difficult in those early days to believe that you're okay, because you will have, like we said, that pressure on you to believe that you're in the wrong.
Yeah.
But actually,
if
unless you turn around and say, I don't want to have to do with you, you're not the one putting those barriers up.
No.
You're so correct, because like in our leaving letter, we said that we didn't want to be contacted to try to change our minds, which is, pretty black and white. And it seems that my family has taken it as don't contact us at all, which, it's an extremist point of view to take, and I'm not surprised they took that. But we also specifically stated we have nothing against anyone, and you're all welcome to, send us an email or whatever. And also, I think it's important that when you leave, to not shun them, like you say, Gilli, like you're not putting up the boundaries, because then that's just stooping as low as they are.
Yeah. don't let their behavior dictate yours. Yeah.
I think it is also important to point out, though, just thinking what Andrea's just said, sometimes it's healthy to put boundaries in place. If you're not, if you're in a place where you can't handle that pressure, then sometimes you will have to, I know it's contradicting what I've just said, but in a way, but sometimes it is healthy to put those boundaries in place and just say, look, I can't handle, if they're unwilling to have a reasonable conversation and the only conversation they want to have is about convincing you to come back and convincing you in the wrong, then it's totally okay to go, you know what, I can't handle this right now. I've got a lot of thought processing to do. I will talk to you in, whatever, but you don't have to put a time scale on it, but it is healthy to do it.
Yeah, I agree. If all they're going to do is emotional pressure, then you're protecting yourself from that. And I would agree. It's about the motives, isn't it? All any of us ever want is some semblance of a normal relationship with the people we love in there, isn't it? That's all we ever want.
And it's not like us that leave are turning around to them and saying, please leave. You have to leave. This is why you have to leave. We don't try to shove our opinions down their throats, which is why we expect the same respect back.
Yeah, that's
so it's just respect the decision.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So
Jackie, just before we move on from family, I think the other thing that massively helped me, and I realize not everyone's in the same position, but if you do have, be it distant relatives who may have left some time ago, sometimes it's worth exploring those avenues as well. If you're struggling without family, because I mean, for me personally, my two uncles and my cousins are pretty much who I look at as my blood family now, and my cousins I pretty much regard them as my siblings, and I'm probably closer to them than I ever was to my actual siblings. But if you do have those connections, not everyone will, but if you do have those connections, I think it can be worth exploring.
Definitely. I mean, you met up with your brother, didn't you, Andrea? After X number of years.
After 15 years or something, and now we're absolutely best friends and we talk every day.
Yeah. So I agree. And similar to you, Gilli, I met up with an uncle of mine who I'd never even met because he had left the Brethren before I was born. But it's still family, isn't it? And it's well worth exploring that. I think. Go on, Andrew.
And all the family members, however distant they may be, are usually glad to hear from someone.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to reach out, and if you don't have any family, reach out to one of us who hosts the podcast. We know how to keep you anonymous, and you don't have to tell us your name. Just tell us you want to reach out and you want a bit of help and support. We're all here to be an ear for you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's part of our job, is to help those that do contact, isn't it?
Yeah, sorry, that was a bit unrelated, but
no, it wasn't actually. It takes us beautifully into the next point, which is communication ability, and that is about how you reach out, which is the considerations. I won't read them all out, but obviously, if we have the leaflet as an accessible link, then people can read it for themselves. But this is more about keeping yourself safe and how you communicate. So I think we all know that if you communicate with a phone that is UBT owned, they can track who you're communicating with and who you're contacting with. So Andrea, Ross or Gilli, what would be your advice to somebody that wants to reach out to somebody, an ex-member?
First things first, get your own device.
Yeah.
And again, this sort of kind of comes back to something I said in my own podcast, and Andrew referred to it a minute ago. Don't go looking for the best iPhone or the best Samsung that you've got to have. Just a 10 quid pay-as-you-go burner phone, essentially, that you can text someone, you can call someone, just to get you through that, that period of communicating with the outside world. And like you say, Jackie, I think it's one of the most important things that we could point out.
Yeah.
If you are trying to communicate with a UBT device, you are really asking for trouble, because sooner or later somebody will be onto you.
Yeah.
And that guilt of having a non-UBT product, it might go against every grain in your body, but if you're going to make a go of it, that's the least of your worries of having a device that's not approved.
Yeah.
And
And
it's your first step of saying, okay, I'm really going to do this. Like, I'm really serious about doing this.
Yeah.
and if you can't get your own device, you can always go down to your local library. They've got computers you can
Yeah, good
use
point,
free of
Ross.
charge.
Yeah, you can get online, you can contact, email, and so on, and set up a safe email account as well,
Yeah.
one that's not connected. And you talk about the guilt of having a non-UBT device, and I know that the Brethren say that there are protective mechanisms on their device to protect you. You can protect yourself. There is an off button on televisions. There is, you don't have to go on, you can make that decision to use the device in a way that will protect you. Just because you've got the device doesn't mean you're going to get lulled onto the dark web or whatever they think is going to happen. You can make that choice to go there or that choice not to go there. So, and I think that's quite an important point to make.
Just going up to that heading, Jackie, I just noticed the communicating well with outsiders. I think it's probably worth touching on, and this isn't coming across. This isn't meant to come across as anything judgmental, but a lot of, and I'll hold my hands up to it when people are in the PBs. There's probably a unintentional condescending attitude to the outside world, and being better than the outside world. That's something that's really important to drop that straight away, because if you're trying to get help from someone and you have an attitude that you're better than them just because of where you've been raised, you're just going to rub people up the wrong way, and they're just going to turn around and say, no,
And speaking from experience, what I did when I was 18, 19, super embarrassed of how I behaved sometimes.
But and we'll admit that we were embarrassed about it. And I look back on things when I did when I first left, and I laugh, cry, or whatever. But there's, in one sense, it's in one sense we're almost bound to do it because of the way we've been brought up.
But then go back to the Brethren teaching, take humble ground. Honestly, just be be grateful to people. And what you'll find in the real world, and it's not the same in the Brethren. They say they're caring, but they speak and their hands are tied behind their back. In the real world, if somebody wants to help you or they offer to help you, Ross has said that. He slept on someone's sofa. They really mean it. So take them up on it and be grateful and be humble.
Yeah. I agree. I do think, as you say, it's not I think the Brethren do have what I call a superiority complex, but that is the nature of the environment they've lived in. It's not, individuals might not have that, but the nature of the environment we must keep separate. God has chosen us. We're the chosen people. All of that fuels into that. We're better than the rest of the world is essentially what it says. So you're right. It's quite important to realize you're the same as the rest of the world, really.
And you will get on if you approach people with that attitude, you will get on a hell of a lot better.
Because especially now, like kids say they leave at 18, they've not really been in touch with people in the real world besides teachers.
No, not they haven't even gone to school in their teen years with people that are not in the Brethren. Their whole world's been very, very secluded, hasn't it? There was a little point here that I also wanted to touch on where it says beneficial to recording things and writing things down. Now, I personally believe this. I think there is a fear of recording things, but the one point I'd want to make to anybody who does sit through a priestly visit, out here in the world, in any potential confrontational situation, let's say an employment situation that's gone wrong or anything like that, the person who is being investigated has a right to have support. And that's something that's denied, I think, in the Brethren. I don't know of any priestly visit where the priests have said, would you like to have somebody with you when we come round? Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm happy to be corrected, but I don't know of that happening. So what you end up with, as we saw in that podcast you alluded to, Andrea, is this huge power imbalance, and particularly if it's a young person. So that's where one way you can counter that without having to say, can I have my mum and dad in here, or could I have my friend who's not in the Brethren here, although I'm, or anything like that, is to actually say, I know of somebody that we suggested, they said to the priest, because I'm on my own with you, I would like to record this visit so that I can play it back and gather my thoughts, because I'm obviously in a bit of a nervous state. And they walked out the door. So, which is fine by that person. So you're not doing anything wrong by asking to record something to defend yourself. And you're not doing anything wrong by saying, I would like to have somebody in the room with me, even if it's, if it's one of us, which I know the brethren wouldn't like, but you have that right. And I think that's quite important to get that across. The same with writing things down. I think you'd all agree, your head's in such a jumble that write it down or type it up immediately. I don't know if that's, you think that would be helpful advice for anyone. Ross, you were going to say something.
No, speaking quite bluntly, there's probably 2 priests to 1 young person. And obviously if there's 2 priests, they're going to remember what's been said between them. But, if you're by yourself, you're going to forget half the conversation that's gone on. So as you say, recording
and they do that on purpose to protect themselves, but they're not thinking about protecting who they're visiting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which I mean, speaking from experience, like we didn't have any priestlies, but I remember thinking, oh, I should record this or I should record that. And I was terrified.
Yeah.
So it's not easy to do, but it will end up benefiting you, even if you don't use it, if it doesn't go public. It's for your own protection.
It does. We're talking about recording things, Lindy, and the rights and wrongs with that. And because it's mentioned in your in your thing, and we're just trying to say, look, you shouldn't be frightened of recording things and saying to the priest, I'm here on my own, there's a power imbalance, I want to record this. And you're right, it is for your own protection and for your own well-being, in that you can then go back and listen to it and think about it. And get things in writing. Or ask them to email things to you, because that, I don't know if this is still the case. Andrea, again, you left fairly recently and you said you were told you were shut up or withdrawn from via email. I've also heard tales that's quite unusual, because they don't like to put that in writing at all.
Yeah, because basically we refused to speak with them or meet with them.
Yeah.
And they were quite frustrated, and so they emailed. They only shut up me and my husband, not my kids.
Yeah.
So,
Lindy, you're back with us. This is quite a long leaflet, and we may not be able to cover it all, but were there any particular bits that you wanted to draw attention to? You obviously put it together with some friends. I know it was a work of art by a lot of you, but were there any particular bits that you thought you particularly wanted to help people with?
I think the key things that I think about now with leaving, if I was to sum it up, there are 2 things, and I guess they're, different sides of a similar coin. But one is that even compared to when I left 15 or so years ago, the amount of support available now and awareness, even publicly and among things like medical professionals and counsellors, things like that, as well as just in general society, I feel like the awareness and language around this stuff, the ability to understand and identify high control groups, it's out of the park different, thanks to the game changer of the internet and social media and podcasts and things like that. So that's really encouraging, is that I feel like there hasn't ever been a better time to leave in terms of being able to access and find support. But the flip side of that, as I think some of you have already pointed out, is that in some ways it's harder to leave the brethren now. Not necessarily. I think historically it's been incredibly painful and challenging as well. But in terms of being more financially tied in, that's definitely been a huge change under the leadership of Bruce Hales to get people tied into this massive financial kind of cartel. So so for people to be really careful and aware of that, checking where your insurance is, where your mortgage is, all that kind of thing, and checking the caveats and the disclaimers there, and getting advice to untangle yourself from that if you need to. But that's like the only thing that I think is harder. And I think aside from that, I would really want to encourage anybody who's thinking of leaving that there has not been, I think, a better time when more support will be available. And it doesn't mean to say you have to walk your own journey and there'll be periods of hard work and challenge and loneliness, but that, there is an unbelievable amount of support and friendship just waiting to kind of, turn up for you. So.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I've scrolled down to it actually, but you've got a whole page on support networks. And one thing I do understand is if you're thinking of leaving, maybe contacting Get a Life for any of us is a little bit daunting, because we know what's said about us in there. We know we're opposers. We know we're the worst of the worst. That's what's said about us. We did do a podcast on opposers and what that meant, but so I won't go into that. But it may be you can reach out to other support networks, and the awareness, as you say, of high control groups. The Brethren aren't the only one. Your Brethren will be surprised to
No.
hear there are many of them out there. And the awareness of being able to reach out to other groups that might be able to help if you don't feel comfortable with contacting an ex-brethren because you're worried that you're not ready to hear, if you like, what you might perceive to be bad words about the brethren. And we understand that. And you're worried that's what you might hear if you contact someone who was ex-brethren. And I think you've listed them all. There's local churches, community groups, LGBT support groups, disability support groups, hobby groups. I know of somebody who joined a knitting group, and that's fine. It's fine. It's contact, it's that social. So yeah, and I think also you've got some, obviously this is written, you've tried to encompass every country where brethren might be, but every country has their own unique support groups, don't they?
Yeah.
Would it be also fair to say that, don't be afraid to contact the police, even just
Oh yeah.
like somebody that left recently had a retired police sergeant that lived down the road, and they just went and talked to them casually.
Yeah, I think most of the authorities, if they really knew what was going on, in fact, the people I know that have left that did have police help for whatever reason, obviously for family reasons, often family reasons and social services, the social service and police help was phenomenal because they can see what's happening, and they will help where they can. You've also got a section here which is obviously very important, about medical, physical and mental health, which obviously medical and physical health, I think, is one thing. And in the sense is relatively, when I use the word easy, I don't mean it's easy, but perhaps I should say more straightforward. You can go to a doctor, but mental health is so much harder, isn't it? And I think we've all had our battles with that and dealt with it in our own way. So have people got tips about what has helped them with that sort of thing? I know you've covered some of them in the leaflets, medication, surviving abuse, but tips of what have helped them to manage the mental turmoil you go through.
I think a big thing is for a start realizing that actually having questions about your beliefs, about who you are as a person, about the PBCC's beliefs. There's nothing wrong with having questions, because that's one of the things that's obviously it's been drummed into us all from a young age, that it's evil to have questions. It's wrong to question, but actually that's perfectly normal and it's okay.
And healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think finding a good therapist certainly for me, it's been massive in terms of mental health help.
And that could be kind of a stigma too, like to go and see a therapist. In the Brethren, it's like, oh, you got to be. There's the talk. Oh, they must be really crazy to see a therapist. No. In the real world, it's actually healthy to see a therapist, and it's good to see a therapist.
Yeah. And it's it's so frowned on inside to be expressive of your emotions, to be sentimental, to be, all those kind of things. And it's okay, and it's more than okay. It's healthy, like you say, to be in touch with your emotions and actually be able to express them and to be able to talk about them and openly and honestly with someone, especially a trained therapist who can help you work through those dilemmas in your head, because you will have them. And I think it would be unfair if we didn't say be prepared for some mental battles, because there will. 90%, I would say, 90% of the people who leave it'd be unusual if you didn't have mental battles after leaving.
I agree. I mean, for me, the biggest thing was, it must be me that's wrong. It must be me that's wrong all the time. It must be me. that's wrong. I'm feeling this mental angst, and I know the brethren expression is that's because you're not right with the Lord, or you're not in the clear. And what I want to say to anybody is, no, not necessarily. It's okay to have those feelings, isn't it? And so on.
And the Lord is not speaking to you just because you might have a question about something.
No.
Like,
or just because you bumped your car.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
But it's very strange to go
true.
into a room and talk to someone you never met before about your inner thoughts. But after you get over that hurdle of strangeness, it's actually very safe because you can totally unload. This is a totally neutral party that doesn't judge you no matter what. And you can also speak to your health practitioner, like your house doctor. You can also talk to them. And mine was extremely helpful before I could have a therapist as well.
Yeah. And then the last bit I want to touch on, because Lindy, I know you haven't got too much longer, you can stay with us. It's a different time zone where you are. But the last thing I wanted to touch on was the values, morals, and spirituality. Now, I think when you leave the Brethren, we all go on different journeys with our faith. And I think the biggest thing to say there, that is okay. It's okay where you go. And I wonder if because I think there's a huge thing when you're in the Brethren, that's the only place where your faith in God counts. And that's the only place where you can truly be saved, because that's what you've been told. So can we just kind of talk about the emotions around that I know I experienced when I left?
I think I think everybody has their, like you say, everyone has their own journey. But I think one of the most important things to point out is that, contrary to the Peeps' beliefs, you don't have to have a faith to be a decent moral person.
No.
You can still tell right from wrong, whether you believe in God or whether you don't.
Yeah.
And that's, I think that's one of the things that certainly I personally got, hung up on, was that, well, I must have to have a faith, otherwise I'm just going to turn into a, immoral wreck. But actually, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If you choose, because I think realistically, how many people in the Peeps actually have a solid grounding of theology? I would say very little. Well, I didn't.
No.
And especially when in the more recently, it's more about reading what's in the ministry rather than the Bible. It's okay to have questions. Like we said, it's okay to have questions.
Yeah. And I also think that whatever your faith is or isn't, it's a hugely personal thing. And it's not actually up to another person to tell you what you should or shouldn't believe in. That's my opinion. It's actually your own personal journey. It's your own, whether you believe in a God, whether you believe in a spirituality, whether you believe in absolutely nothing. That's your own personal faith. And that's okay. And I think that's a really hard hurdle to get past when you leave, is that fear, well, if I don't believe in God the Brethren way, then, as you say, my life's going to fall apart and everything's going to go wrong. I could say to people that happens whether you believe in God or not sometimes with life, doesn't it? That's just the way, that's just life. And I think you touch on quite a few of those things in the form of questions, Lindy, which I think is really good, because you're not saying this is what you should or shouldn't do. It's more saying, what do you want to do? Do you want to connect with other Christians? Do you want to not go that route at all? And I think they're all things to consider.
I think to me that whole question of your morals and spirituality, and that links so closely back with the mental health thing, or because really mental health is about your individual well-being and that kind of thing in its environment and in relationship, of course, but your inner being, which, as you say, spirituality is always a very personal thing, even if it has communal or relational outworking. At the end of the day, it's your own journey. And to me, the spirituality question or religion question comes back to that same thing that we began the podcast with, in a way of what is your voice, and what is it that you want? What is it that you want your life to be defined by, and what is it that you believe are the guideposts that you're working towards in your life? So to me, it comes back to that same thing. And I think it is really hard, again, as we said at the start of the podcast, when you're used to an environment that has dictated your choices for you and your decisions for you, especially your religion, your spirituality, how to read the Bible, how to connect with God, it's all being dictated to you. In that sense, it's remarkable, despite the Brethren hating Catholicism so much, it's incredible how similar they've ended up being in terms of believing that God and your spiritual experience has to be mediated through the Pope, and that you need everything set for you by the Pope and the Church.
Yeah.
And whereas, to my reading of Scripture, there's multiple verses that point to things like saying, that is not necessary, that a human mediator or a certain particular church group is not needed as a mediator to determine for you what your spiritual path is. And there's verses that talk about, from a Christian worldview, that at the end of the day, it's you each individually have to give to account. It's not going to do you any good to stand there and say, oh, well, Bruce told me this was the right thing to do, or yeah, the brethren told me this was the right thing to do. And I'm speaking just from a Christian worldview there. And I realize, of course, that others hold different beliefs, but I think even from a Christian worldview, this whole thing of relying on the brethren and Bruce to be your mediator between you and the divine just doesn't even stack up with a basic reading of Scripture anyway. So, yeah, I think at the end of the day, it does come back to you working out what it is that you believe. What is it that you want?
Yeah.
Who is it that you believe God is? That's for you to determine.
And that's
For you,
okay.
for you to discern.
Yeah, and that's okay. And that takes us back to motives, doesn't it? And I think in a sense, that's probably that there's the practical journey of leaving the brethren, which we've touched on, the finances and everything else. But that is probably one of the biggest mental journeys, I would think, is actually working out where your beliefs and your ethics are. And then if you have no belief, actually realizing that that is okay. If you don't want to have a faith, nobody has an issue with that. It's not a crime in this world. It's actually a law that you can be of no faith if you want to be. And that's
realizing that it's okay to try out different things too. If you
Yeah.
think maybe you believe in this or that, or try it
Yeah.
out. I mean, I'm not saying from experience, but you meet so many people in your new life out of the brethren, and you realize, okay, they believe this, that's fine. They're not trying to make me believe that. We can get along just fine, or vice
Yeah.
versa. You just generally just be a good, honest, kind person and accept people for who they are. Don't try to shove what you believe
Yeah.
down anyone's throat. And it's,
And if you accept people for who they are and ask questions, you learn a lot. And personally, for me, I was so ignorant about other faiths when I came out of the Brethren because I only ever knew one faith. But you only learn by asking questions and getting to know other people and finding out what their thought processes are, don't you?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you're influenced by them. You're taking on their information and you can sift it through and then draw your own conclusions, can't you, about what you want to believe in or not believe in. And I think
if you don't know, if you go through a period of not knowing what your faith is,
Does
not
it
knowing
matter?
whether you believe, whether you don't,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
There's no pressure on you to come out with some,
To make a decision about that. It's an evolving
to declare
process.
declare your loyalty any which way.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that's quite a big one stepping stone. Points I think we haven't touched on are the more practical elements. So we've talked about the emotional side of the family, and we've talked about the spiritual side, moral side, and we've talked about managing. But you've got the practical side, and the practical side is if you leave and you're asked to leave your home, you need a roof over your head, you need a job, you need employment. And people's experiences of those very practical things are very different and often depends on the circumstances that you leave. I often say, if you're lucky enough to have time to put a plan in place and save some money and just quietly, it's fantastic because you've got a cushion to fall back on. But not everybody finds themselves in that fortunate situation. Sometimes you get expelled when you were least expecting it for whatever reason. So again, looking at what your questions are there, we'll start with finances, Lindy, and the questions asked in this leaflet is personal control. If you're married, we've touched on a little bit, considering the impact. If you have a business partner in the Brethren, I mean, you had some experiences on employment there, Gilli, didn't you? And so did you, Ross, didn't you? Where they kept you on for a period of time and then it was goodbye.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was, and I think this is one of my sort of soapboxes, if you like, because I made so many mistakes on this when I first left. And I'll happily hold my hands up that I made mistakes. And for me personally, I was forced to resign. I literally had a piece of paper shoved across the desk in front of me written in my name, saying that I resigned as of this date. And I think that for one, don't sign anything until you. And I was actually offered legal advice, and I went to the meeting. But one thing I would say to anyone is, if you are offered legal advice and someone else is paying for it, listen to what the solicitor or lawyer has got to say, because he looked through this document that I've been given. He said, "This does not look good." And at the time, I was so naive and so brainwashed. I said, "Look, I just want to sign it and get rid of it." And I should never have done that. So, heed the advice. If you are given legal advice and you're given that opportunity, listen to what they've got to say, because they will pull stuff apart. If it's, if there's something wrong with it, they will pull it apart. But also, don't put your signature to stuff especially like a resignation letter, because you're just taking the power out of your hands.
Yeah. And could I just add on that point that if you had at a later date decided to challenge that document in that it was signed under in a coercive environment, which you can do, the Brethren's case legally would have been far stronger because they offered you legal advice.
Yeah.
So they're actually protecting themselves from you coming back when you're not so much mental to say, hey, hang on a minute, I signed that document in a coercive environment and I was given no choice. Well, we offered you representation. So as you say, listen to it, just pause. Take it and take
some time, and don't be. And I think this applies to what I'm going to say is it applies to everything we've been talking about. This whole thing of them being the highest power in the land, it's not true. You are allowed to push back, whatever it is, whether it's an employment decision, whether it's them giving you a priestly, whatever it is, you are 100% within your rights to have your own voice and to push back. And actually, from a legal standpoint, they've got absolutely zero grounds to do anything unless you've committed a crime or something. But you are well within your rights to stand up for yourself. And it's aside from the moral thing, because they'll obviously tell you that you shouldn't be standing up for yourself, but just know that you are well within your rights to do that.
Definitely. And legally, from an employment point of view, they can't sack you on the spot unless they can prove gross misconduct. And it has to be gross misconduct. If they want to sack you, they have to give you written warnings. They have to have meetings. They have to put it in writing. They have to offer you representation. There has to be a process. What they can often do, obviously in your case, Gilli, they coerced you into signing something saying you were resigning. But another tactic is redundancy. Now, they do have a right to say that your job is we can no longer support your job. Therefore, we're making you redundant. But what they can't do is make you redundant, even if they give you a payout, and then employ somebody else to do exactly the same job that you did. Because if they're making you redundant, they're saying your job is no longer valid. We can't afford, we don't want your role. So they can't just put somebody else in to replace you.
Even if it's a different job title.
Yeah, if it's the same job.
If they're doing the same job, which was what happened with my my then partner. They waited until I was off the books, and then conveniently made her redundant. But because she'd been less than a year, she didn't really have many employee rights at the time. And it's something that I think everyone needs to be aware of: is know your rights, know where you stand on that.
Yeah, because that happened to my husband. I mean, he didn't want to leave his brethren job just simply because, why should he? Work and church are separate, and what happened is that they put him under a lot of pressure by leaving Mr. Darby quotes on his desk and whatnot, like, no actual Bible quotes, but ministry quotes, and jump scaring him in the conference room with two of them, one of him. And, he held his ground, but eventually they tried to slip a paper on his desk really quick over his shoulder, like, oh, just, can you quick sign this? And he was like, absolutely not. And in the end, one morning he just went in and got his laptop and phone taken away and told goodbye. And he sued them, took them to court, and he got a payout. And so
good for him.
He didn't even have to pull the spiritual
abuse
card, but he had it. The lawyer said he had that ready to go. They were pressuring him. And this has also happened with another family who's left recently.
Yeah.
Because they're not aware, like, they have this holier than thou attitude, which unfortunately is often the case with business owners. But they don't actually realize that people that want to leave have planned this, and they're 5 steps ahead of them.
Yeah.
And you can't treat someone like that. You can't just kick them out legally.
I think it's also important to say that, if you are in a position, because quite often, let's face it, if you're working for a PE company, it will become untenable from your own point of view. But if they are in a position where, for example, if they're offering you a payout, seek legal advice and actually find out whether it's, don't be afraid to actually go back and fight for more. Because at the end of the day, if you're in a position where you're going to be unemployed, you'll need every penny you can get.
Yeah. And I think you're right, Gilli. I think it's a balance between the wrongness of how they might get rid of somebody in an employment situation. But equally, if you're the person that's left, you may find your mental health is better not working for Brethren, because you're there, you're in that environment, you've got that constant pressure. And if you can get a payout for leaving, a legitimate payout for the years you've worked there that can give you a buffer before finding future employment, but know your legal rights. And basically, they cannot sack you. They cannot sack you on religious grounds. They know that, which is why they find other reasons for making you redundant. But know what your rights are there.
Yeah.
Well, and this comment here is good to touch on too. Someone anonymous says about going on sickness benefit or unemployment benefits. That's not something that's bad to do. If if your pride maybe has to go on the back seat, you need to just say, look, I need to take care of me. I've been through some massive trauma recently that, no matter what you do, only another ex-brethren can understand what you're going through. And that's not a bad thing to do if you need to take a step back and just catch your breath.
I'll add to that, sickness benefit doesn't mean you have to be physically something wrong with you. It can mean that at this point in time, your mind is in such a turmoil, you're not mentally able to take on work. And that's okay. That it's mental illness is now recognized just as importantly as physical illness.
And that's why it's important to also keep your family doctor in the loop. Because they can also recognize the trauma that you're going through before you leave and during, and then help you get that sickness benefit if you need it.
I think it's just going on to the practical side of things. And again, I know this has been covered before, but I think it is so important to highlight about being realistic. Andrea touched on it earlier on, but being realistic about, because a lot, I know for myself, I was shoehorned into a role that I wasn't fit for. And when I left, I was then looking for similar roles, but actually I wasn't suited to that role. And I didn't, and, especially nowadays, they are so, they're so, their wages are so ridiculously inflated. And you'll get, I've had young people contact me and they're, on 60, 70,000 pounds with zero qualifications. Drop your expectations. Be realistic about what you can, and that's something that also from a circumstantial point of view as well. Don't again get the ideas, all the things that you've had the ideas of in your head as to what the PEEB lifestyle is. Detached house, nice car. Forget it. And unless you're fortunate enough to be in a position where you do find that kind of work, fair enough, or you've got your own business and it continues to do well once you leave, fair enough. But if you're someone who's employed and you have been sort of shoehorned into a role that's not actually for you, just take, look seriously at what you actually need in life.
Yeah.
You don't need a detached house, especially if you're on your own. A one-bed apartment would be more than adequate to get you through those.
Or share apartment,
absolutely, for sure.
Yeah. And same for jobs.
Yeah.
Take what you can get.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, that one, because I remember it's a while back now, but one young girl we helped leave, and we had this similar problem looking for a parallel role, which was an admin role. The salary was a lot less, and a lot of the applications asked for your previous salary. So of course it's going. So we actually said to her, and this is, how many hours a week did you actually work for that Brethren company? And she said, well, I worked about 50 hours a week. I said, well, let's put an hourly rate. And when you put an hourly rate on her salary, that was much more comparable with the salary she'd get for working a 40-hour week or 37.5-hour week. So think of ways around it practically like that as well. You do earn, you're used to having the money, but as I understand it, long hours are worked, whereas a lot of roles that you'd go into, the hours are set. And if you get work over, you'd get paid overtime. So in other words, there's an element of choice about that. And those of you that left more, because when I left, I was lucky. I had a job with people that weren't Brethren. We were allowed to, and that was my one stability at the time, was my work, and going to work with people who realized what was going on and who were really kind to me. It's not what people have now, because you're not allowed to work outside of the Brethren. But what have been the experiences of people trying to find employment or income and so on since leaving? Because it's not easy, is it?
No, not
You
at all.
haven't, I think when you're in the Brethren, you've never had time to think about what you could do or even want to do. And you may find this with your girls, Andrea, and Lindy, with your children, you now have the opportunity to let them develop into what they want to do, which was not an opportunity afforded to any of us. So sometimes I think when you leave, you need that time to think, what type of work am I suited to? What floats my boat? And you may get a few jobs that don't work out before you get one that does. I think that's probably fair, isn't it?
Yeah, like
very much.
I'd like to hear what Ross has to say, how employment has been for him since he left.
So regretfully, I haven't worked since I left, because I do have quite a lot of ill health, like kidney failure, etc. So yeah, I can't really.
Ross, I mean, I know your circumstance, and that comes back to what we were saying earlier. That is okay too. That there are systems, certainly in the UK, and I'm sure other countries, that help people like you that don't have the ability to work, and that's okay. It's not it's not a shame or a crime. It's about actually making your own way in life, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I still have a lot of shame about it, but it's quite interesting. I was speaking about it to a friend over the weekend, and he said, it's the imposter syndrome, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just want to touch back on, I know it's going a bit out of context now, but I want to touch back on something we were talking about, mental health. And on that sheet was about addiction, if you're suffering with addiction problems. So obviously that's something that's close to me. And I just wanted to say, for anybody that's thinking of leaving, that is struggling with those sort of problems, there are free services out here that can help you, and they can also signpost you to mental health services as well. So it's worth researching what's available in your area.
Definitely. I think that's touched on in the mental health addictions comes into that. It can be addictions to anything. I mean, addictions are sometimes, I don't know, but sometimes can be the result of being in a controlled environment, can't they?
Definitely.
And I think that's probably why they happen. I mean, alcohol seems to be a fairly big issue amongst the Brethren, doesn't it? And I think sometimes it's because the addictions are your escapism from yourself or what's making you unhappy. But you're right, Ross, there's a lot of services out here. You had help with that from independent services, didn't you?
Yeah, so I had a relapse last year, and I'm now working with a local service that offers one-to-one support and also group work as well. And that is another way of meeting people, because I've made quite a good friend out of one of the people that attends. And as I said, they can also direct you, signpost you to relevant mental health services as well.
But that's the benefit of going to things like that, Ross, is you make friends out of it, and you find someone with similar interests to you and similar experiences, and you can, like in the real world, you can make friends wherever. You can choose your friend.
Yeah, exactly.
You can, because you have that empathy. And
yeah.
Lindy, I know you have to go in a couple of minutes. So was there anything that you wanted to sort of, because I know you sweated a lot of blood and tears with others over this leaflet. So anything you wanted to particularly draw out that might help somebody either outside to understand the impact of leaving, or inside if they've got the turmoil that we've talked about?
Oh, well, I was just going to say on the topic of employment that I recently spoke to somebody who's never been part of the Brethren but who works for them, and I said to him, I didn't say anything. I just had just discovered that, and I said, "Oh, and what do you think of them?" And he just looked at me and he said, "Well, money is their god," and I said, "Yes," and then he said, "And their second god is alcohol." Which I thought was very interesting. Somebody's worked for them for a long time, and it's a big company. He knows the Brethren well. And on that note, to anybody who's thinking of leaving and who's daunted by the loss of finances, I want to encourage you to not make money your God either, because it's very easy without realizing it to have subconsciously taken on that God and that kind of goal, financial success and material prosperity as being your God. And it's just life is so much better when money is not your God, when your career choices and your lifestyle and your relationships, your values are not defined by material prosperity. There's so much more wonderful things to live for. And yes, we all need money, and being poor is awful. And I don't want to minimize, the struggle of financial stress and strain. And yet, I can say as personally, as somebody who struggled with my roles in the Brethren because they were a poor fit for who I am and my interests and my strengths and my talents. It's been incredible to be out of the Brethren and to be free. I've had multiple different jobs by choice, trying out different things of what I'm good at, learning what I'm bad at. And all the way through, it has been such a delight to be able to choose jobs that it's not to do with their, the bottom line of the pay packet I receive, but aligning them with my particular strengths and interests. And that there's just such a profound joy in being able to find meaningful work. It's a deep human need, and it's so wonderful to be free to choose your own employment and to get guidance around that instead of having it dictated to you. So and I'm always just so excited and thrilled when I hear of others as well who have left, who have found meaningful work in areas that they've been able to choose. It's so wonderful to see their potential being developed and expressed. So that's just my comment on there. And you said then any final comments to maybe outsiders who are listening and trying to understand the impact of leaving. And again, just looking at this booklet, I am reminded of how massive it is to leave the Brethren. It is such a totalitarian group. It's such a big change. I think it's really challenging sometimes for outsiders to understand the depth of the loss. That if your whole family had been killed in some terrible accident or something, then sometimes I think you'd get a lot more support or recognition of how deep the trauma might be. Whereas when you've lost your family in this way, and your employment and your community and your upbringing and all of that, the loss is like a death of everything, and it's incredibly hard. So being kind and supporting people who are going through this, the impact lasts for years and years, and giving people that support and empathy for the long haul is really, really crucial. So
I totally agree. And I'd like to add to that, and this is quoting the Bible, there's absolutely nothing wrong with money. It's the love of money that's the problem. Yeah, money in itself isn't the problem. It's, if you say it's money is their God, as your a colleague that you met work for a brethren said, it's when it comes to that level that some issues need addressing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to have to go,
And
but thanks
Andrea,
so
as
much.
you're the Lindy, thank you so much for joining us and talking us through the leaflet and for the work you've put into that. Thank you. I'm sure it'll be an invaluable resource to other people like Andrea. Yeah, yeah.
See you, Lindy.
Andrea, you've been the most. What would you say to somebody that's thinking of leaving? Bye, Lindy. I should say, as you've been the most recent person amongst us who's left, what would you say to somebody that's going through that? I don't know what to do. I feel I'm going to lose so much. I don't know what it's like out there. Just some sort of final thoughts.
Yeah, I would say
Sounds like a meeting, doesn't it?
Can you link on to this? Yeah. I would just say write it down.
Sorry. You have to laugh. Carry on.
I know. Write it down. Like, I know if somebody, is say a teenager at home or somebody with a spouse, if you write things down, yes, it's a bit dangerous that it might get found. We'll make a note on your, non-UBT phone. But I kept a journal and I wrote, family members that I may know that have left the Brethren, or people that I may know who have left the Brethren, and steps, pros and cons, like it said on that Thinking of Leaving pamphlet, pros and cons, and how to integrate, and things that I wanted to accomplish while I was still in the Brethren to help me start to integrate into the real world. And I found that really helpful. That may not be possible for everyone, but I tried to, be more friendly to people in public, and I signed my kids up for a dance class and I would go along and talk to the mums, and just kind of pulling away a little bit from doing so much in the Brethren, like volunteering at Campus and Co. I just said, no, I'm not available right now. And I didn't do so much entertaining. It was subtle, but it helped me just kind of say, okay, I'm making these tiny little choices and I'm putting my foot down. And then you gain strength. And then go through all those other steps in the leaflet. It's
empowering, I imagine.
Yeah, and go through the other steps in the leaflet and just do them one by one. Write them down, how you're going to get them done. And it's as again, I say this with no judgment, but don't expect things to go perfectly, because in the Brethren, especially having left recently and seeing that high level of control and expectation that's in there, your life is pretty much laid out for you and there's not too much that goes wrong. You're going to have to be strong and expect some things to go wrong, and not to if you get knocked down by them, that's fine. Just get back up.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Because
have your bad day, get back up.
Yeah.
I mean, I was at work recently and some grief hit me out of nowhere and I ended up crying at work and I was so embarrassed, and my employer came over and gave me a hug and gave me some chocolate, and I just gave her a brief rundown, and it was so embarrassing for me, but I got over it.
Yeah.
It's, it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
And it takes time. It takes time. That's all I can say is just, it takes time, and be proud of yourself for each step that you do.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important point. Your life is pretty much mapped out in the Brethren, but also I think it's probably fair to say you'll want for nothing in the Brethren, apart from freedom, but you'll want for nothing, because
that important one,
because, in a sense, they talk about it being a community, they talk about it being an ecosystem, and they will look after their own. It might be, there's a very, very fine line, in my opinion, between looking after and controlling.
Yeah.
And I think it's a fine line. And I'm of the opinion the Brethren move into the controlling zone rather than looking after. But I think when you're in the Brethren, you don't see that.
Yes, because as long as you perform exactly as they expect you to perform and walk that line and talk that talk, you are good.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the minute you show any individuality or questions, you're asking for trouble, which is, it's so mentally exhausting. It really is.
It is, particularly if you've got those questions in your head as well.
Yeah.
Ross, what would you say, with your experiences? Because we've all come here with different experiences, which, as Lindy said, is great. And everybody's experience of leaving is different. all with trauma, but all different. What would you say to anybody that's thinking of leaving? Maybe from your perspective, thinking of anybody that does belong to the LBGT community that are in the Brethren.
Yeah, I think what I'd say is try, if you can, to mix with people out here. Try and find some sort of LGBT meetup group, maybe. They are about. Try and find people that are like you, and because they'll make you realise that actually you're not a bad person. You were born the way you were. You can't do anything about that. Having said that, I know that obviously it is daunting to, when you're in there and you're thinking of leaving, it's daunting to try and find any groups like that, because you automatically think, you're going to be struck down dead or whatever for contacting people. But my experience was that I was going down to AA meetings in London, and I was mixing with the blokes down there afterwards, and it helped me to integrate, because I realised actually they're not bad people. So if you can, that'd be one piece of advice I'd give. Although, as I say, I know it is very hard, because obviously when you're indoctrinated in there, it is hard to reach out to. Well, it's hard to reach out to ex-brethren and to non-brethren, really.
But I think it's good that there are quite a few ex-brethren who are from the LBGT community that are vocal, because you can reach out to them. They've been there. They've been in the brethren and had to work through everything that they've had to work through. And there'll be an empathy there, won't there, Ross?
Anybody is welcome to reach out to me on Messenger, Facebook Messenger. I'll help where I can.
Yeah. And I think too that one of the main things is, I kind of see when we help people, this is another thing I sort of wants to say, when we help people, yes, we can offer perhaps short-term practical help, but actually those of us that have found or are still trying to find our way in this world, or whatever stage we're at, our job is to go on that journey with you and to help you to be self-sufficient. Because I think the most important thing when you leave, you do have a cradle to grave looking after within the brethren. You won't have that here. You have to learn to be reliant on yourself ultimately. Now, that doesn't mean you're alone. It doesn't mean that. You will have a lot of help and support. But ultimately, you've got to find a way of having your life, building your puzzle, doing what you want to do, the life you want to have. And that'll be very different to anyone else's, won't it? Gilli, I don't know what your final thoughts to somebody thinking of leaving might be from your experiences.
No, I think it's like you just said, the practical side of things, and just want to touch on briefly, like things like, probably most people who leave won't have been sat through a job interview. Writing a CV. There's so much help online. Even using ChatGPT to help you write a CV as to what your experiences are. But I think, just going back to something Andrea just said a minute ago about pulling back from the lifestyle, and just linked onto what you just said as well. I think it's so important to realize you don't have to carry that lifestyle on. The whole thing of spending ridiculous amounts of money on whatever it is, alcohol, that high intensity lifestyle. And realizing that it's okay to just be yourself. If you don't feel like going out and socializing, you don't have to. But also, I think there's another practical point which was brought up before, and it's something that's probably worth just touching on briefly. Is I think all of us have probably experienced being brought up to trust those around us. Now, this is going to be a little bit contradictory to say this, because obviously we do want them to trust people on the outside world. But I think it's also worth pointing out things like electronic scams, where people can be naive and gullible and things like that. Be wary of those kind of things. If an email looks too good to be true, just look at the actual email address it came from, or someone sends you a link that you don't recognize, you don't know the person, avoid clicking on it. But also on that front, so coming back to the people you trust, I think you mentioned it, Jackie, about being, we're all labeled as opposers because we do this podcast. Actually, we're not evil people.
No.
We're just people who are voicing our opinions and expressing the right to have an opinion. But so it's been a bit of a roundabout way of saying it, but in answer to your question about what would a final thing is, I think preparation is so important. And I personally, I wasn't in a position where I could do much preparation. And I think Andrea just touched on it as well. I think you need to be, of course, obviously we want to help people who leave, but I think it's also deadly important that we point out it's not going to be an easy journey. There will be ups and downs, and especially to start with, probably more downs than ups. And there will be hurt, especially when it comes to family. But there's also that quote, isn't there, about family is not always not necessarily blood, and you will establish connections that actually turn out to be stronger than your own blood family. And it's an old quote, isn't it, about time heals. The reality is, I don't think the pain ever dies away.
No.
But it lessens over time, and because you have to get up every day and you have to live your life. Do I miss my family? Do I miss my parents? Of course I do. But actually, I'm 13 years down the line, whatever it is, I don't actually really know them anymore. And that's the reality. That connection will lessen over time, unless you're fortunate that they're willing to keep contact with you. But you have to be prepared for that. And we're not sugarcoating it, saying it's going to be an easy thing to do, because however old you are, you've come up being made to think a certain way. And actually, the outside world doesn't work like that.
Not like that.
But focusing on the positives, there is a hell of a lot to gain than compared to what you're losing.
One thing I'd like to say is that I thought of it when Gilli was talking, is in the Brethren, you're not really used to a lot of rejection. And that's something that's all, it's not to be negative, truly it's not, but just, you're going to face rejection, but it's okay. Just stand back up after and don't let it get you down, because it hurts and you're not used to it. Like, you might go to a job interview and they are like, no, thank you. That's okay. You'll find a job that fits you or whatever. And it just makes you stronger, because when you have those moments, I'm speaking from experience, when you have those moments where you're like, man, what did I leave for? Everything is dumb. You just think, well, I might have a quiet life, but at least I'm free. I can do what I want, when I want, with who I want. And one thing that I find is really important for people thinking of leaving is in the Brethren, it's hard to get time alone, but try to get time alone. Just try to, if you can't get in the car, go for a walk. Take your sunglasses, take your Brethren music, earpods, whatever. Just get out alone and think, because that is something that I found to help me a lot, is you're not given a lot of quiet time to just think. And that's what they don't want you to have, because you'll start to think about leaving.
But also preparing for that rejection from a Brethren point of view, because a lot of the time I personally found I was still living in the same area as the peeps did when I left, and I'd come across people in the supermarkets, whatever, and it was the people that I would have least expected to have turned their backs that they would physically turn their backs and walk away when they saw me out in public. So be prepared for that, because the people who they are when you're toeing the line, they're a different person when you're not.
And it's not that they hate you, they just don't like your decision, and that's okay.
Exactly.
And I think there's another point that's perhaps valid to make here with rejection. I think sometimes people in the Brethren reject you because they're hurting too. And the ones that you were closest to are probably the ones that are hurting the most. They're hurt that they feel they can't have contact with you. And actually, the rejection of you is their way of putting a suit of armor around them. And I think sometimes if you can view it like that, like with your mother saying what she did, Andrea, I'm sure that hurt like mad. But actually, your mother probably doesn't want to see you because it will upset her. That's not saying it's right. And my final point will be there: if you're thinking of leaving, do tell the Brethren they don't have to behave that way because they claim they don't. But I think it is also the protection of their own feelings, isn't it?
And they don't understand why you want to leave. That doesn't make sense to them.
It doesn't in their mindset. Well, just to say thank you so much, everybody. I think it's been a really useful conversation. I really hope people in and out the Brethren get to hear this and it helps. We will put a link to that document that we've been discussing through so that you can easily download it and work it through. But in the meantime, take care, everybody, and reach out if you need anything. Thanks a lot. Bye.
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 How can you support Get a Life podcast? You can donate internationally via PayPal at www.paypal.me/getalifepodcast. PayPal also has a QR code that can be scanned. Or donate to our Get a Life podcast GoFundMe. If you're in a high-demand religious group and need help, please go to oliveleaf.network. To share your story or be a guest on the show, email info.getalife@proton.me. Check out www.get-a-life.net for Get a Life merchandise, books, and ways to support or get support. Please remember to like this video, subscribe to Get a Life, and comment.